Welcome to the SkullKing Fantasy Football Podcast, powered by StatRoute.com. And now, here's your host, Ryan Skullroot.
Hello and welcome back to another episode of the SkullKing Fantasy Football Podcast. My name is Ryan Skullroot. I am your host, and tonight we get into the previews for this week's games, the Week 10 matchups. Before we get started, we want to make sure to ask you to please hit that subscribe button, whether you are watching on YouTube, listening on CastBox, iTunes, Google Play, Spotify, and all the multiple different podcast listening platforms that you could possibly be hearing us on. We would greatly appreciate if you'd hit that subscribe button. We would also love it if you could leave us a rating or review. Let us know what you think of the show. Without those, we are in essence kind of lost. We don't know what you guys want, what you guys don't want if you don't tell us. So please let us know what you think of the show. Also, if you could as well share out these episodes, we would greatly appreciate that with your friends and family and those who you think could benefit from the fantasy knowledge that we impart to you guys. This week is trade deadline week for mainly, I believe, for those of you in I want to say in Sleeper, as well as in Yahoo. I believe Yahoo, the fantasy or the trade deadline is the end of Saturday. I believe it's midnight Pacific time. And then as far as Sleeper goes, if your commissioner set it for Week 10, your trade deadline is the end of the Monday night game. So it goes all the way through the end of the week. So once that Monday night game is over, there's no more trades. So the articles that we have posted to SkullKingFootball.com so far this week, and actually most of what we are posting this week, is all about trade deadlines and who to offer, who we think you should possibly try to trade away, see if you can get some takers. Also, trade targets that you should look at acquiring. That's a couple things that we are putting up. We've got two of them already up. Running backs that you should trade away, and another one is wide receivers that you should target. And so those are a couple of the articles that we have. So again, a lot of what's going to be on the website this week is going to be dealing with trade deadlines. I believe ESPN may be Week 11 in terms of their trade deadlines. So these will carry over into next week. So make sure to check those out over the next couple weeks if you have a trade deadline coming up for your fantasy leagues. One more thing I wanted to mention is we've partnered with a couple of great websites that help with your fantasy football endeavors. The one that we've been talking about the most on the show lately is Prolytics, their DFS format. What they do is they have their own AI learning machine that they have written, the program that they've written to help do their projections and everything for DFS. Phenomenal site that we are happy to partner with. Really have enjoyed their info and their partnership. The other one that we wanted to mention that we haven't talked about in a little bit, me personally, though, we have an ad plan for them in every single one of our podcasts, is Finish First Fantasy. Sean Wittrell, who is one of our running back writers, has put together a website where what they do is they basically it's like a fantasy football counselor that you set up weekly meetings with. To kind of go over who you should pick up, who you should drop, what your game plan should be for the week. I believe they're still taking on clients through the end of the season. They do it for redraft, for dynasty, and for DFS. So Sean is a great football mind. That he has been a phenomenal writer and analyst for SkullKing Football. And we love the fact that we're partnering with him and his personal website to get that going. So please go to finishfirstfantasy.com. That's finishfirstfantasy.com. Check out what Sean is doing over there. Make sure to set up a consultation of some kind with him. I believe to do that, it's info@finishfirstfantasy.com. Make sure to email them. See if they're a fit. We absolutely love what they do, so check them out. Again, that's finishfirstfantasy.com, and make sure to let them know that the guys from SkullKing sent you over there. All right, that kind of does it for the announcements. Why don't we go ahead and get right into today's headlines?
Today's headlines.
All right, to start it off for the headlines, number one story, Mahomes, the Mahomie, is back. If you've seen those stupid State Farm commercials with Patrick Mahomes and Aaron Rodgers, the Mahomie. Patrick Mahomes was a full participant in practice today, being Wednesday. He looks to be on track to play Week 10. For those of you who drafted Patrick Mahomes and have been dealing with the fact that he has been out, this is obviously great news for you. The other fantasy players, I think that this is a major boom for Tyreek Hill, but for most importantly for Travis Kelce. He has struggled a bit this season. Has not had the best season, I guess you could say, in terms of fantasy production. And so I think this will really help him out to really get going again this season. As of right now, Travis Kelce is... Well, I mean, yeah, I guess you could call it a down year, but he's still tight end number 2. And I think we kind of got stuck expecting more out of him. Austin Hooper's had a phenomenal year, been the number 1 tight end so far. And again, when you draft, I think part of the hesitation with Travis Kelce is because a lot of people drafted him so high. Some people in the second round. I know of a couple people that drafted him in the first round of their fantasy drafts, which I thought was a little insane. I believe I got him in a couple drafts, 10-team drafts, that I believe I got him in the third round. You hope for more work, for more for a little more production than what we've gotten so far. And so I think that he is in pretty decent shape in terms of, well, here's the thing. In terms of average points scored, he is 4th at 11.5 points per game. Still above George Kittle at 11.4. So Travis Kelce, I think, will become again more that almost wide receiver 2 type of player in terms of scoring. Now that Patrick Mahomes is back, I think that they'll be able to get that going a little bit better. So, all right, moving on. Story number 2. Another highly drafted player this year, James Conner, was limited in practice today. There's a possibility that he plays in Week 10. Now, for those of you who may have Jalen Samuels, I would not get rid of him yet. I still think that Jalen Samuels is going to start this week. I think that they're kind of limiting James Conner. I think it would be, for lack of a better term, irresponsible of them to start James Conner this week. I think that Jalen Samuels is the better option, and that if they want to continue to play, if they want to hold on to James Conner and keep him healthy, they need to sit him out this week, dealing with an AC joint issue in his shoulder. One strong hit and he's done for the season. I think they'd be better off, kind of holding them out for this week, letting Jalen Samuels take the load. And Jalen Samuels played pretty well this past week, so I think that Samuels will be fine if he's the one who plays. I think that James Conner should sit. So for those of you who have James Conner, I would be careful with him in terms of in terms of what to expect for this game. If he does start, for those who have Jalen Samuels, you can't start Samuels. I mean, it's possible that he still gets a bunch of work, but against the Rams, we just don't know. So this is just kind of a sticky situation. Keep watching the injury reports to kind of see where it goes from here. So moving on, David Johnson says that he is ready to play Week 10. His quote is saying, "I am 100%." That is very good to hear that he is ready to go for this week. For those who have David Johnson have been missing him for the last couple weeks, I know that it's been a little bit trying, I guess you could say, with some of his injuries, and especially even without the injuries, how well Chase Edmonds has been playing. And then last week, without Chase Edmonds and without David Johnson, Kenyon Drake comes in and absolutely tears it up. So Drake could eat into David Johnson's production a little bit this week. We'll kind of see where that goes. Again, they're playing against the Buccaneers in Tampa Bay, and Tampa Bay has been very tough against running backs this year in fantasy production. So not the best matchup, but again, because of his ability to catch the ball in the backfield, I think he should still be okay. So real quick, we want to go over a couple more stories in the NFL. According to the Detroit Lions, Matthew Stafford is dealing with another back injury, but he says he's fine. Des Bryant plans to contact NFL teams about a return in about 2 weeks. I don't think he gets a job. I think that he is done. What was it, his first or second practice with the Saints last year when he tried to make the comeback? Tears his Achilles, done for the season. So I think that he is done. I don't think he'll get a job offer. So the Giants are considering placing Sterling Shepard on IR. With all of his concussion issues, that would probably be a good idea. What is concerning is that he is still dealing with concussion symptoms. If he is forced to sit, or if they do put him on IR, I hope that he is able to come back 100% healthy next week or next season. If he gets another concussion, whether it be this year or next year, his career needs to be looking at being done, which is a shame for a guy his age. But that's just kind of the expectation in terms of, with concussions, you have to be careful with dealing with head injuries. So, couple more things. The expectation is for Amari Cooper to suit up this next week. I believe going up against the Vikings in primetime Sunday night, I believe, is the game. Dwayne Haskins earns another positive step. He will be starting after the Redskins come off a bye. O.J. Howard and Cameron Brate were both full participants Wednesday in practice. Rams wide receiver Brandon Cooks is out for this week, still dealing with his concussion symptoms. Again, we've been talking about Josh Reynolds. I think that he is a solid fill-in for Brandon Cooks. Did a solid job filling in for Cooper Kupp last year when Kupp tore his ACL. So I think that Josh Reynolds is a fine fill-in and should provide possible flex value in 12-team leagues, going basically for as long as Brandon Cooks is out. Anything else? Couple more things. To start off, T.Y. Hilton will not play this week. So, again, Zach Pascal is going to be the main wide receiver going up against a very inept Miami Dolphins defensive secondary. So he should be a good streaming. I think he'll be a solid DFS value for this week. Just putting that out there. So, then the other thing, Bengals head coach Zach Taylor said that he anticipates A.J. Green making his season debut Sunday versus Baltimore. And then about 2 hours later, another thing came out, said after all the rah-rah goodness about A.J. Green and Taylor saying he's going to play Sunday, and that they have a plan for him, Green did not practice today, being Wednesday. The plan was for him to be a full go. Don't know what to say, don't know what's going on. So, again, keep watching. A.J. Green may make his debut this season, or may make his debut this week in Week 10. May not. We just don't know. So that is it for the news and notes. One little thing, just not that it's all that fantasy relevant for the most part. The Eagles wide receiver Desean Jackson on injured reserve, so Philly is re-signing Jordan Matthews. Great. So yeah, there's that. Oh, and we did get another little update on Le'Veon Bell with he had the MRI. MRI came back clean, but he is still dealing with knee soreness. Did not practice today, so it could be Bilal Powell and or Ty Montgomery this weekend against the Giants. All right, that is it. We already talked about Evan Ingram in the last show, not playing this week. So that is it for the news and notes. Now we'll go ahead and get to a little commercial break, and we will go right into this week's game previews. Have your fantasy teams been struggling this year? Or perhaps you've been doing pretty well but want to put yourself over the top? Then make sure to visit our friends over at Finish First Fantasy Advisors. They are the premier one-on-one consulting firm that specializes in providing you with expert support to help guide you to the championship. You will be matched with one of their expert advisors to provide you with the season-long insight for your redraft, dynasty, or DFS formats. Their advisors will contact you weekly to answer all of your questions and provide you the needed information to get to the next level. Set up a free 15-minute consultation by emailing them at info@finishfirstfantasy.com or by visiting them at www.finishfirstfantasy.com. That's www.finishfirstfantasy.com. All right, we are back. Let's go ahead and get into these Week 10 game previews. Let us get it started off with the Thursday night football game, the Chargers visiting the Raiders. Starting off with the Chargers, Phillip Rivers, I believe, is going to get back into a fantasy relevant position for those of you in single quarterback leagues. The Raiders have been giving up a lot of points to the two quarterbacks, second most points on the season. Fantasy points on the season, two quarterbacks, and over the last few weeks have given up 6.5 points more to quarterbacks than a quarterback's projection, so that fares well for Rivers, especially with how they've kind of gotten their offense a little better going while they still stall in the red zone. The offense for the Chargers has gone pretty well since they fired their offensive coordinator. Gordon and Eckler, I think they'll be right about their average, right about their projections, maybe a little bit less. The Raiders have been pretty good against the running game so far this season. Keenan Allen should be in for a positive game. He has struggled to get into the end zone, to really have anything good happening since week 3. Hopefully he will come off that this week again against a Raiders defense that has struggled against the passing game. Williams should be a solid flex play, and Hunter Henry will be a top 5 tight end option, in my opinion, for this week. Moving on to the Raiders. Derek Carr has been very, very good this season. Top 6, I believe, in terms of passer rating. That being said, the Chargers have been very tough against quarterbacks. Just look at what they were able to do last week against the Packers and Aaron Rodgers. So I think that Derek Carr is going to have a little bit of a tough time. I think that he will finish mid-quarterback 2. Josh Jacobs should be in for a big game. The Chargers have struggled against the run game, so Jacobs should be in for a big game. High-end running back 2, possible low-end running back 1 numbers. As far as the wide receivers go, I think, again, this is going to be tough sledding for them. If it's tough sledding for Carr, the Chargers' defensive line has gotten to quarterbacks very well. Could make it hard for Carr to get the ball out to Williams and Renfro. So I would drop them down a little bit in my rankings. And Darren Waller still is a top 10 tight end at this point, no matter what. Moving on, the Lions visiting the Bears. I think Stafford struggles a little bit in this game. The Lions have been very good, especially at home, in terms of keeping quarterbacks and basically the passing game in general under wraps. The problem is they have struggled against the run game. Could be a good game for Ty Johnson and J.D. McKissick. Galladay and Jones, I still have Galladay as a top 15 wide receiver for this week. Jones, I think, takes a little bit of a hit simply because Jones is more of the just deep ball specialist, and Golladay runs a little bit more of a route tree and tends to run a few more short routes and be a safety blanket for Stafford. Hawkinson, he's still just a tight end too. Moving on to the Bears, Mitchell Trubisky could have a little bit better of a game. Again, they're dealing with they're probably going to be dealing with wind in Chicago. It's going to be cold. I think that Trubisky is still still a quarterback too. I don't really want to go anywhere near him for the most part in fantasy. So I think that I will just I will avoid him. That being said, the Lions give up the most fantasy points on the season to running backs. They average giving up about 5 points more than projection to running backs lately over the last 5 weeks. So David Montgomery should be in for a huge game as long as their head coach, Matt Nagy, just gives David Montgomery the ball. I think this will be a solid overall game for the Bears offense. Trubisky gets a little bit of a bump. Montgomery should be in for a big game. A-Rob, Allen Robinson, could have a decent game as well. I still have him as mid to low wide receiver too. Trey Burton, I don't have anything honestly for the Chicago tight ends. I don't think that they've been utilized enough, and until that actually happens, I'm avoiding. Moving on, the Ravens versus the Bengals. This should be an absolute blowout. Lamar Jackson may very well be my quarterback one for this week. Ingram, I think, should put up very good numbers. The Bengals give up the second most amount of fantasy points to the running back position, and give up about 3 points more per game to over projection to running backs. So Ingram should be in for a solid game as well. The pass game should be high flying. The thing is, the Bengals do actually do a good job of stopping up the tight ends. So Andrews may still continue to struggle. He has had it a little bit rough lately. Looking at just so far on the season, Mark Andrews is ninth. Looks like ninth in terms of fantasy points per game at 10. Still pretty solid production. It's really dropped off over the last few weeks. So he is a guy that I would still have a little bit of trouble trusting this week, but you're going to start him because of the possibility that he gets more involved again. The wide receivers for the Ravens, they're still all wide receiver threes with upside is the best that I can call them. For the Bengals, Ryan Finley gets his first start of his career. The Ravens are tough against quarterbacks, and lately have been really making quarterbacks suffer. So Finley, we will see what he can do. I'm not trusting him if I don't have to. I have him in a 16-team Superflex as my number 2 quarterback this week because I have no other options. So that's kind of where I'm at with him. The running game's going to struggle. I don't like Mixon this week. And the passing game, again, because of Finley, his first start, I don't know who to trust in this game, so I'm kind of avoiding all Bengals in terms of fantasy if I can. Moving on, the Bills versus the Browns. The Bills should be in for a solid game this week. It could be a little bit of a close game. That being said, I think that Allen is solid. The Browns have struggled stopping pretty much anyone so far this year. So Allen, with his running ability and passing ability, should be a solid start. High-end quarterback 2, low-end quarterback 1. I think that Devin Singletary is in for a big game this week against the Browns defense that cannot stop running backs, giving up the 9th most amount of fantasy points to running backs. Brown and Beasley. Brown is a solid low-end wide receiver 2. I think Beasley could be a sneaky play for your DFS lineups. Again, more of a cash game type of play than a tournament style play. I'm not seeing him, suddenly breaking out for 2 or 3 touchdowns. I think he may get 1. He does average 7 targets a game. Moving on to the Browns, this is going to be a tough sledding for them. The Bills' defense is in the top 4 in terms of giving up fantasy points to the quarterback, to the wide receivers, and to tight ends. So, therefore, the only thing that they struggle with is running backs, which means Kareem Hunt and Nick Chubb should be in for big games. I think that Kareem Hunt may get a little work. I do not trust him to be any more than a running back 3 or flex play. I can't because, again, Chubb is the guy in that offense. He's the only really positive thing that has happened. So it may be that it's just the Chubb and Hunt show. Could be that's it because the passing game certainly has not done anything so far this season for the Browns. OBJ and Landry, wide receiver 3s. That's the best I can do for him. Moving on, the Falcons and the Saints. This could be a high-flying game. It also could mean that it could also be that the Saints absolutely blow out the Falcons out of the water. This is in New Orleans. Matt Ryan, I have as a high-end quarterback 2, maybe. Freeman and Smith, this is not a game to deal with Freeman in the run game. The Saints give up the second least amount of fantasy points to the running back position, and over their last 4 to 5 games, running backs have been averaging 10 points under their projection. As far as the wide receivers go, they've given up the Saints given up the 9th most amount of fantasy points to the wide receivers. However, lately, again, giving up 4 points less than projection to wide receivers. I think this is more of a Ridley game than it is a Julio game. Julio's going to be going up against Marshawn Lattimore, who completely shut down Mike Evans earlier in the year. Darren Hooper, I still think, is a tight end 1. He'll be a top 5 tight end option for this week. The Saints, Breeze, he's the other guy that I have with Lamar Jackson as a possible number 1 quarterback for this week. Kamara, I think, finally gets, now that he is healthy and has had the bye week, I think he gets back into the flow of things. He'll be a top 10 running back option this week. I think that Murray may still have flex value simply because it'll be Kamara's first week back, and because Murray played so well in the 2 weeks that Kamara was out. That being said, Kamara is still the guy to own. I think that Michael Thomas is going to be a top 5 play in terms of wide receiver. Ted Ginn, I think, could be a sneaky. He's one of those DFS tournament guys that I could see having a really good game. The Falcons give up the 3rd most amount of fantasy points to wide receivers, averaging over the last 4 or 5 weeks, giving up 4 points more than players' projections to wide receivers. And Jared Cook, again, this offense just doesn't utilize a tight end hardly at all. Moving on, the Giants versus the Jets. This could be a semi-close game. I think my projection right now has the Jets winning 24-21. Jones, again, both these guys are going to be quarterback 2s, mid to low quarterback 2s in this game. Saquon, I think, is still a top 10 running back just because of his ability to not only run the ball but also catch it out of the backfield. Tate is going to be the top wide receiver that I like in this game. Again, Jones does a good job for the most part throwing to Tate in the slot. With Ingram out, Ellison is going to be the starting tight end. I think he is streamer possibility. He has a little bit of appeal there, not much, simply because the Jets do very well stopping tight ends in fantasy. So I would say that Ellison is one of those guys. If you're desperate and need a tight end, he's a guy that you could go with. As far as the Jets go, still waiting to hear what's going on with Le'Veon Bell. Montgomery seems to have been passed by Bilal Powell as the number 2 running back. Montgomery has not had a touch in the last 2 weeks, while Powell hasn't really done much. He's only had, I want to say, 4 carries. 2 carries last week, and he's had no more than 4 carries in a game yet this season. So if Le'Veon sits, I think it could be a pretty even time split between Montgomery and Powell, but Powell is probably the more likely to get the work. As far as the wide receivers go, the Giants give up a ton of points to wide receivers. I think that Crowder is the better option. Anderson is put it this way, Anderson is the tournament play option that could finish with 150 yards and 2 touchdowns. Crowder is the cash game option that will probably finish with 10 targets, 8 catches for 70 yards and maybe a score. So that's kind of how I view that. And again, I'm just not seeing anything out of Herndon yet this year, so he is off my fantasy radar. Moving on, the Cardinals versus the Buccaneers, the 2 Bruce Arians teams. Yes, I'm not including the Colts because they only coach them because of their coach going on having cancer leave. So the Cardinals and the Buccaneers, this is going to be a high-scoring game. I conservatively put this one at 31-28 Buccaneers, but I think that everyone goes off except for the running backs. I think that Johnson could be solid, but the Buccaneers average over the last 5 weeks having running backs score almost 10 points less than their projection. However, they give up the fourth most amount of fantasy points to quarterbacks, the most points to wide receivers, second most to tight ends. Now, the Cardinals don't really have tight ends that they use. Really, their tight end is Larry Fitzgerald for the most part. So I think that Christian Kirk has a solid game. Keyshawn Johnson could be in for a good game. So I think that looking at what Russell Wilson and Tyler Lockett and DK Metcalf did to this Buccaneers defense last week, I can see Murray having a very good game throwing the ball around the yard. So I think that Murray is probably going to be he may be a little bit less expensive in the DFS. I think that either one of these quarterbacks, Kyler Murray or Jameis Winston, will be very good options for DFS for this week, and could provide a lot of value. They also could be very highly owned because of that. Moving on to the Buccaneers, Winston I have as a top 10 quarterback this week, just like Murray. Ronald Jones, he's going to be the starter, but I think that he could do okay. Again, I think they will focus mainly on the pass game. Evans and Godwin should be in for huge games, and we still have yet to see the tight ends get used even when they're healthy. So Howard could be okay. I'm not necessarily going to trust it, even though they're going up against the Cardinals defense that gives up the most amount of points to quarterbacks and to tight ends. So that being said, really I think it's going to be a whole lot of pass and catch from the quarterbacks to wide receivers in this game. Moving on, the Chiefs versus the Titans. Mahomes is back. This is not the easiest matchup. It is in Tennessee. Tennessee has been pretty tough, honestly, against pretty much everyone. They're tough against quarterbacks. They're pretty tough against wide receivers as well. Middle of the road against running backs, but the running backs for the most part haven't been all that great. I know Damian Williams had a decent game last week, but most of that was on a 50-yard run. And the rest, I want to say he had 13 other carries for like 30 yards. So Williams and McCoy, I don't really like in terms of fantasy this week. Hill, I still think, is a solid play. Kelce, you're going to start no matter what. Watkins, Hardman, Demarcus Robinson, those guys are all wide receiver threes with upside. That's the best I can put it there. So as far as the Titans go, Ryan Tannehill has played very, very well over the last 3 weeks. Again, 20 points, 19 points, and 25 points. I think if the Chiefs get up, Tannehill could be passing a lot and could provide a decent value for DFS. A streaming option for those of you who are desperate because of the 6 teams on bye week this week. So definitely a guy that could be a possible option for you. Derrick Henry, I think, eats in this game. The Chiefs have been terrible against running backs, giving up the third most amount of fantasy points to running backs. Derrick Henry, they have also over the last 4 to 5 contests given up an average of 5 extra points. So 5 points above projection to running back. So Henry should be in for a big game this week. I really like him for DFS. The wide receivers, Chiefs have been tough against wide receivers. Brown, Davis, and Humphreys. The Chiefs, on average over the last 4 to 5 contests, given up almost 10 points less than projection to wide receivers. That being said, I still kind of like Brown in this game. And that Humphreys is a solid, okay pick because of the fact that Tannehill likes targeting the slot receivers. Jonnu Smith at tight end, middle of the road Chiefs against the tight end. So Jonnu Smith could be an okay streamer for this week. All right, I had to get some coffee. 5 more games. Dolphins versus the Colts. This one should be a bloodbath. The Colts have been very solid against quarterbacks, wide receivers, running backs. They're top 5 or top 10 in terms of giving up points to preventing points from the running back position. And now the Dolphins don't even have their number one or what used to be their number two running back in either Kenyon Drake or Mark Walton. They're down to Kalen Ballage, Laird, and Gaskin. I hope that Gaskin gets some work. Being a Washington resident, seeing Gaskin play at the University of Washington, I think that he could provide some value. That being said, the Colts have given up 7 points less than production over the last 4 or 5 contests on average. So it's not going to look good for the Dolphins' run game, meaning they're going to have to pass the ball. And now, with Preston Williams out, it's just Devontae Parker and Alan Hearns for the most part as their wide receivers. They did just pick up Greg Jennings off of waivers, but I'm not expecting him to play this week. And then Mike Gesicki could get some work as a tight end. Colts giving up the 10th most amount of fantasy points to tight ends. So Fitzpatrick, I don't want anything to do with him in terms of fantasy for this week. So really, I don't want anything to do with any of the Dolphins. Let's just putting it honest. As far as the Colts go, whether it's Brissett or Horner, I think Brissett is actually going to play this week. The Dolphins give up the 5th most amount of fantasy points to quarterbacks. Quarterbacks have been scoring 5 points over projection the last few weeks. Mac should be in for a huge game. Pascal and Kane, I think, could be solid this week. Pascal, again, he is another tournament-style DFS option, I think, for this week, because of the fact that the Dolphins give up the 7th most amount of fantasy points to wide receivers, and over the last few weeks have given up 8 points over projection, almost 9 points over projection to wide receivers. So as far as the tight ends go, it's hard to tell who is going to be getting the production, who isn't, so I'm kind of avoiding that situation altogether. Moving on, the Panthers at the Packers. I think that the Packers win this game. Starting with the Panthers, Kyle Allen, I don't want him in terms of fantasy this week. CMC, you are going to start him no matter what because he is Christian McCaffrey, and he is in half-point PPR is the number 2 fantasy scorer so far this season. I think he's right behind Lamar Miller. I think Lamar Miller's the one, or Lamar Jackson. Sorry, Lamar Jackson. Lamar Miller's on IR. Lamar Jackson in terms of points. Although I know that Russell Wilson's right up there as well. The Packers give up the 6th most amount of fantasy points to running backs, so McCaffrey should just run all over them. Again, the Packers do well against the passing game. I don't like DJ Moore. I don't like Curtis Samuel for this game. Greg Olsen could be okay. The Packers have struggled a little bit against tight ends, so Kyle Allen to Olsen could be solid. Really, I think it's going to be a lot of short passes to Christian McCaffrey and Olsen. We'll see what they can do with those. The Packers, Rodgers, again, the Panthers have been middle of the road against quarterbacks. I think that Rodgers is a high-end quarterback 2, maybe low-end quarterback 1. This should be the Aaron Jones and Jamal Williams show. The Panthers have struggled against running backs, giving up an average of 10 points over projection to running backs over the last 4 to 5 weeks. So really this should be an absolute running back show in this game. As far as the wide receivers go, Adams, I think, could be okay now that he is back and should be fully healthy. I don't really trust Marquez Valdez-Scantling or Allison all that much. The Panthers have been giving up 4 points over projection to wide receivers, so Adams should be in for a solid game. Jimmy Graham, again, I think that he is okay. He's a top 10 tight end option, so if you've got him, you're going to start him, unless you've got a guy that you know is going to be better. So moving on, the Rams versus the Steelers. Starting off, Jared Goff, coming off of bye week, I think could be okay. The Steelers have been pretty tough against against quarterbacks. I think that with the week off, hopefully Goff should be in good shape and able to hit his wide receivers and tight ends pretty well. I think that he is still high-end quarterback 2 for this week, maybe low-end quarterback 1. I think that Gurley struggles. The Steelers have been one of the top teams against the run game so far this year. Top 7 in terms of giving up points, fantasy points to the running back position, and over the last 6 weeks, 4 to 5 weeks, running backs are averaging 6 points under projection. So I think that this could be a tough sledding for Gurley. Really, I think that this is going to be a big game for Cooper Kupp. Again, the Steelers have given up 4 points over projection to wide receivers the last few weeks. So Kupp and Woods, I think, could be in for games. And again, I think that Josh Reynolds is a solid flex play in 12-team leagues and higher. So Gerald Everett really has only had a couple weeks where he's really been all that great. So for me, I think that he's a streaming option, but that's it. As far as the Steelers go, Rudolph could struggle against this Rams defense. Rams have been very good against not only the quarterbacks but also the wide receivers. This could be tough sledding for Juju and Deontay Thompson. So really, I think that it's going to be tough for them. I think that the player to really look at for this game is going to be Jalen Samuels. He is the main fantasy option I would look at for this game. And really, that all depends on whether or not Connor is healthy. I don't think Connor should play. He might. If he doesn't play, I think that Jalen Samuels is in for a solid game. Could provide running back 2 type numbers in this game against the Rams, even though the Rams are kind of middle of the road against the running back. Vance McDonald, low-end tight end 1. He's kind of always on that high-end streaming option in terms of in terms of tight ends for this season. Moving on to the Sunday Night Football game, the Vikings at the Cowboys. Both defenses play very good. I think this could be a defensive struggle or really a defensive dominated game. So I am calling this one the Cowboys will win this one 14-10. Kirk Cousins struggles in primetime, period. He struggles against winning teams, period. That's just what Kirk Cousins does. So I think that this is going to mainly be a Dalvin Cook type game. That being said, Dalvin Cook could struggle. The Cowboys give up the 11th least amount of fantasy points to the running back position. So Cook may get into the end zone. I think he probably is the one who scores the lone touchdown, but he may only finish with like 60 rushing yards. Diggs and Johnson, I think, are going to struggle a little bit, especially if Adam Thielen's not there. Cousins, I have him as a quarterback too, even though he has been the highest QB passer rating since week 5. I think he struggles in this game. Smith, I think Irv Smith is the better option in terms of tight ends in this game over Rudolph, and even over Witten and Jarwin. I would rather have Irv Smith. I still think he's only a maybe a high-end tight end too, and that Cousins could be using him as an outlet to get away from the pass rush from the Cowboys. As far as the Cowboys go, Prescott, I think that he's still low-end quarterback 1. This is going to be a tough game. The Vikings have played very well against quarterbacks and against running backs. Zeke, I think, is still going to get his numbers. He is a no less than a top 10 option. You're going to start Zeke. Cooper, I think, as long as he plays, should be a solid option. Could be one of the guys that gets into the end zone this week for the Cowboys. I have him still as a top 10 wide receiver. Gallup is more in that 20 to 25 range. Witten and Jarwin, streaming options, that's all they are. I know Jarwin got that 40-yard touchdown this last week or whatever. Really, I think that Witten may produce low-end tight end 1 numbers, maybe. Really, it's streaming option, that's it. Tonight, we are going to cover the Monday Night Football game. Seahawks at the 49ers. I think this is a close one. Unfortunately, for my team, I think that the Seahawks may come up. I hope they win. I'm just trying not to be a homer. So that being said, I think the 49ers may win this game. Their defense has been absolutely spectacular. The Seahawks have struggled really in general against high-powered offenses. They play well against running backs. It's the passing game that they struggle against. Sanders could have a solid game this game. Garoppolo could put up very good numbers. He played very well against the Cardinals last week in Arizona. George Kittle, I think I may have him as my number 1 or number 2 tight end this week. As far as the Seahawks go, Wilson, you're going to start. You're not going to sit him, even against the 49ers. I still think that he could put up low-end quarterback 1 numbers against a 49ers defense that has played very, very tough. They haven't really played all that great of teams, but neither of the Seahawks for the most part. So just putting that out there. They basically played the exact same teams except for 1, I think, is the only difference. I think Wilson, again, he's still going to be a top 10 quarterback option. Carson could struggle a little bit, but I still think he's top 15 in terms of running backs. Lockett is the only one that I really think is going to get at least his production. He may finish just under his projection, but he is still going to be a solid player. Metcalf and Gordon, they are going to be Hail Mary wide receiver 3s. Gordon, I have him more in the wide receiver 4 range for me. Again, this 49ers defense is number 1 against quarterbacks, number 1 against tight ends, number 3 against running backs, and number 4 against running backs, number 5 against wide receivers. They've been absolutely dominant this year. That being said, the Seahawks offense has been absolutely explosive. So I think this is a close game, comes down to it. Unfortunately, I do think that the 49ers may come out on top on this one. So that is it. We've got it all. So thank you for listening. Again, this is the SkullKing Fantasy Football Podcast. I know I keep saying that I'm going to try to do a DFS podcast for you guys. Just with my time and being a stay-at-home dad, having the family, it's tough to get to that. I will see what I can do. Maybe try to put out a small DFS report or something. I will do what I can to get that out. I tried to incorporate some of the DFS stuff into the game previews. So thank you guys so much for listening. Again, my name is Ryan Skullward. You are listening to the SkullKing Fantasy Football Podcast. Good luck this week, and we will talk to you later. Hey, SkullKing Nation. Thank you for listening to the SkullKing Football Podcast. Did you like this episode? If so, be sure to go to iTunes, Stitcher, Google Play, and YouTube to subscribe. Also, please leave us a rating and reviews to let us know how we can better help you rule your leagues.